Hello and welcome to the debate called Artists' Crusade. From the writings of Swift and Dickens to Goya's 3rd of May and Picasso's Guernica, art and literature have often been interwoven with politics. And today, in the wake of the global pandemic and Black Lives Matter protests, many argue that art has no alternative and that a failure to recognise the political character of art makes the work worthless. So should we see all creative work as playing a vital part in forming the culture of our time and so inherently political? Or is this to undermine the very nature of art itself, which should be focused on creating works of aesthetic value and offering new ways of making sense of the world? Well, we have a stellar panel to debate this. Eileen Myles, who's a poet, author, political activist, who's won innumerable awards, as well as actually running to become president of the US, which is about as political as you can get. Frances Morris has worked for Tate, been a curator for Tate since 1988, and was appointed Tate Modern's first female director in 2016. And Sir Anish Kapoor is a Turner Prize-winning artist and world-renowned sculptor who's produced some of the most recognisable pieces of political art in the last 20 years. So I'm going to ask each of them to do a 3-minute pitch before we start the debate on the question, do all artists have a duty to make a political statement? Frances Morris, you start.
Why not? Okay. So I want to start with Vasily Kandinsky's painting, Cossacks, in Tate's collection. Some of you will be familiar with it. The Cossacks of its title are scarcely legible, just identifiable as black dots in a thrilling swirl of pigment. Painted on the eve of the Russian Revolution, it stands for the power of aesthetics over politics, subject matter sublimated by pure colour, form liberated from content, the retreat of the artist from the real world. And that has been the story of modern art for much of the last century. In fact, this debate is a very modern one. The notion of the aesthetic as a category that underpinned the fine arts did not exist until the 18th century. It emerged as the old commissioning culture gave way, church and state replaced by the private collector, craft relegated in status in deference to fine art, and the great academies established with their hierarchies of genre, their exclusions of women and workers, an era of transcendent value liberating the artist, and indeed the viewer, from the responsibilities that shaped cultural traditions of centuries. Art history shaped and instructed the story of Western art as a master narrative of exploration and conquest, a story of pioneers, just as compelling as the narrative of colonial exploration and conquest that provided the backdrop to it. Art history accounted for the shape and content of our museums and galleries, nurtured the markets, and in turn forged an enduring association between money and artistic value. But in truth, no artist lives outside their time, however high the ivory tower, however white the cube. They and their work are intrinsically political because both artist and work are embedded in the ideological and cultural context of their time. So the real question is not about representation per se, although metaphor and analogy are powerful tools of communication. Tanya Baguera, the Cuban activist artist, in a recent performance work entitled Tatlin's Whisper, replaced Kandinsky's Cossacks with real mounted police who kettled the audience in the museum space. I often contrast Baguera's work with Kandinsky's. What is at stake, in her view, is not so much representing what is political, but acting politically. And that is about the artist's duty to think about the consequences of their practice. That duty manifests itself in many different forms. As British artist Bob and Roberta Smith has observed, to draw a lemon or a landscape can be as deeply subversive at a time when our education secretary declares that choosing arts in school can hold children back. It can also mean joining forces in protest, as Culture Declares is doing. But the battlegrounds are now shifting. And in this new age of the Anthropocene, engulfed as we are by the pandemic, confronting climate and ecological disaster, and communities divided by class and race, we are challenged to confront the urgency of a different kind of representation. The question of who gets to be an artist, who's doing the talking, who isn't talking on behalf of whom, and who is listening. That's the pitch.
Thank you, Frances. Anish Kapoor, do artists have a duty to make a political statement?
Well, I'm going to have a go. Picasso once said, "Painting is war. It is not decoration for your living room." I want to put this alongside Bobby Sands. The IRA, Bobby Sands, that is the IRA prisoner who died on hunger strike. He said, "War is won not by the pain inflicted, but by the pain that can be suffered." I say, it is in the mythological translation of pain that there is art. By taking their own lives, Rothko, Pollock, Van Gogh give us mythological reflection on the anguish and pain they endured, and the pain, therefore, residual in their work. We can't separate one from the other. Artists, let's not forget, make mythological propositions. They do not make aesthetic objects. Susan Sontag reflects that the most effective art as memorial to the Vietnam War are the photographs of Eddie Adams, capturing that moment before death in his picture of the execution of the Viet Cong prisoner. The imminent moment is drawn out to be poetic, timeless, heartbreaking. Sadly, the most terrifying witness to the Holocaust is the newsreel footage of the camps, and not, I'm afraid, the art made to reflect it. W.H. Auden is one of that rare breed of artist who could write in the midst of calamity. His Age of Anxiety is still poignant. These lines from his great work, and you'll forgive me for trying to read them, tell us much about where we are today. But the new barbarian is no uncouth desert dweller. He does not emerge from fir forests. Factories breed him. Corporate companies, college towns mothered his mind, and many journals backed his beliefs. In this age of coronavirus, of Black Lives Matter, and of ecological disaster, we are confronted by much that is confusing. Culturally, Black Lives Matter reminds us that we have to rethink the basis of our cosmopolitanism. Not enough for our cultural institutions, forgive me, Francis, to fiddle around at the edges of the abomination they called world art, while it is central to their beliefs that all great art is white and male. Time to end cultural equivalence. We have to learn again how to look, how to read a thing for what it is and not for where it came from or what gender made it. Ecologically, we need to rethink the Christianizing of our environment. This post-Enlightenment moment has to mean that we learn to accept the raw, the wild, the unchristian, first in ourselves and then as a consequence in the natural world. This is a reversal of at least 1,000 years of the taming of the savage. On COVID, oh dear, we are led by a bunch of Etonian upper class, excuse me that I'm with women, but cunts. What on earth can we expect from them? They can only be counted on to continue to fortify the capitalist model that put them where they are. Art then, according to me, can't be led by the need to say anything. What I know as a man or as an artist is of little consequence. It is my intuition that must lead me. My mission has been and continues to be the deschooling of myself. In, I'm afraid, the absolute certainty that this frees my spirit as I forge onward. Beauty, then, like political rights, are not a promise to come somewhere, sometime in the future. Beauty is here now. My job is to recognize and act.
Okay, so Eileen, Anish says it's all about visceral beauty, but do you think that artists have a duty to make a political statement?
I think it's so interesting that Anish used that word cunt and made it be uncomfortable for women, where I think
I'm sorry.
It's more uncomfortable for me as an American, because I think the word is used so radically different in each of our countries. I've seen entire TV shows where people could not get over that difference. So I think art and politics are always contextual. There's no separating it. I think...
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.